Awesome. Well, listen, thank you for joining us this morning. I guess as a good start, it'd be great to, for our listeners, for you to introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about like your personal journey, really, from BAE not that long ago and now to being in such a senior role and as the head of the Digital Foundry. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks very much. So my role now is I work inside, as you said, the Digital Foundry, which is a new organization inside Defence Digital, set up really for two main purposes. Firstly, to create a more federated ecosystem for software delivery across defence. That means giving a voice to all of the 22 odd teams delivering software every day out there in mod, whether that be DNS teams, whether that be defense intelligence teams, whether it be a Navy team, anywhere in defense where they've got a team delivering, giving them a bit of voice and giving them a community to be as part of in a more kind of formal way. And with that federation, we're trying to create common services which people can reuse. And so we are a more effective joined up software delivery ecosystem. The second part is really creating an organization whereby the bureaucracy of it is optimized for software delivery. Defense does some amazing things. I was in Portsmouth when the first aircraft carrier arrived, and it's an incredible feat what UK PLC can do in the name of defense. But we're not necessarily optimized for software delivery, which goes at a different kind of speed with different kind of risks and opportunities. And so what we're doing with this sort of reset and creation of this new organization is optimizing the bureaucracy and really confronting some of those thorny blockers of the bureaucracy to make sure they're aligned more for delivering software at pace than getting a steel box to go bang or what we're traditionally quite good at here in mod. Yeah. So that's where I am now, and so your question said the journey I've come on. So I did a couple of things before I joined the civil service. So I ran my own tech company and I was a maths teacher, and then I got lured into government at the time. Mike Bracken and GDS got set up. Government was on a digital journey around how it wanted to use its data. I started Department for Work and Pensions. We had the biggest data centers in Western Europe at one point there, and they just started as I joined their journey to the cloud. I think it's taken about 7 or 8 years, which for me really shows some of this stuff is not quick. So and then I went around a number of bits of government. As you said, I did comment out into industry, into BAE systems, which was really interesting to see the different drivers and incentives which our kind of industry partners have, before ending up with the Royal Navy. And the Royal Navy is where I was one of those 22 digital teams out there in defence, as I spoke about. In some ways trying to avoid too much interaction with the center and really focused on delivering user-centric applications and services at pace in an iterative way. That grew over a couple of years and we were pretty successful in that sort of goal, and others across defense were on that journey as well. But I think I got to a point whereby some of what I was trying to do was just not scalable any further. I was having to do too much of the underpinning foundations, and there wasn't an operating model where I could confront real tricky blockers like talent, which is, if I'm honest, they're going to be one of the key themes throughout all this. Everyone wants to talk about the tech or the AI, but actually talent is perhaps our biggest theme for how do we make this successful. So last year I sort of went poacher come gamekeeper and jumped into Defence Digital to take on this opportunity to lead this new organization, Digital Foundry, which, as you said, as I said earlier, is really aimed to address some of those problems which I was finding down in the Navy and enable teams like the Navy to continue to scale and to continue to be successful in delivering value to their users.
Yeah, sure. No, and to be fair, I think you've answered part of my next question, but I was really interested to see, because you've been there through the evolution, when it was Project Program Nelson all the way through to Navy Digital Services. What were some of the key themes that you saw when you started through to when it was fully fledged, proper digital organization?
Yeah, so the tangible difference of doing agile software delivery, and there's a couple of bits in that for me. First of all, it's with the user and for the user. So that's very different to perhaps some of the requirements-driven approach before. It's at a different scale. So traditionally, we would write an option that would come with probably quite a big bucket of money. You'd have a requirements manager capture the key user requirements. It would go in a big document. A delivery agent would accept that document, cost it, and then sort of perhaps 3 years after the user first sort of identified a problem space, somebody might start working on it. But you might not actually see any, I think you can touch for maybe another couple of years. So the lag between problem to solution was really great. When starting agile software delivery, the user saw a thing, gave some feedback to the thing, and then perhaps 2 weeks, 4 weeks later, saw and touched and used the thing again, and it changed and it improved. And that was really, I think, it was really powerful seeing the reaction from the serving personnel and civil servants, the back office in the Navy, where they got really excited by that sort of change and that opportunity to use digital to transform the way that they do their bit of business. And that business could be the sort of spiky warfighting end, or it could be, managing finances better. All of that is in support of the sort of purpose of UK defence. So that was a real sort of amazing journey around seeing the impact of that. What we had a lot of challenges of is all those things I said. We have all these processes around ILRs and FCRs and options and all this kind of goodness. Money wasn't necessarily available just in incremental steps. Understanding how you address all of those were some of the real challenges. And I think part of the reason the 22 digital teams got set up across defence, of which the Navy Digital Services was one, was the innovation agenda back in 2015, because that gave us access for the first time to money outside of an annual budget cycle. And that allowed us to be able to go and say, we've tried it, we've understand the problem space, we've tried a couple of things, here they are. We've got a benefits case and a business case here around why we actually think we should scale that idea and take it a bit further, because we can see how that can give real benefit to our users, and we could have that whole conversation over a couple of months inside one financial year, and they can see and touch the user thing. So that was some really big changes and quite exciting. But how you scale that is exactly the work which we're working on now.
Yeah, no, nice. And I guess, from the outside looking in, it did always seem that, the Navy was leading the way in that sense. Have you seen, other parts of mod take a lead from the Navy, and does that seem to be, the direction everyone's going?
So I think lots of people were leading the way. I think different people led the way in different parts. And so if I take a couple of examples of my colleagues, I think the Army figured out that you needed to fix the fundamentals before anybody else. So what they set up with the Army data warehouse and the Army hosting environment, that really laid the foundations, the fact that you've now got a common building block to be able to really develop at pace. Now, arguably that's something which would be provided centrally in the future, but the fact that they got some of those things right, and for example, their ability to really oil the security machine to enable them to deliver at pace, I think they were really successful on that. So I think Army there, if I was going to sort of call out other people, I thought Defence Intelligence's relationship with industry, I thought was really really exciting, and I think that they thought about different supplier base really ahead of the game. If I look at DNS, I think they had some really exciting thinking around how to use the enterprise tools on which come with our ModNet laptops and devices. How can we exploit them further? So I think down in the Navy, we pioneered some of that agile software development. I think we pioneered culture quite a lot, which I think really underpins this, and got people excited by what we're doing. But I would definitely say there are lots of pockets of real excellence out there in defence, which kind of helped drive that change. And I suppose one of those bits of change, which I've really seen, is 2015, we had that innovation agenda. But what we really, I think, have been successful on, and this is a collective around all those different teams, is, and I remember I sat down, I was doing a pitch around quite early on in the Navy, and a captain turned around, I think he's a rear admiral now, turned around to me and said, "I get all that, Dave. I've got one of these smartphones in my pocket. I get how the world is changing, but you've got to remember, I'm a pusser, and I want another grey object floating around the Yoggin. And if I'm going to invest in you with some of this digital stuff, that's going to reduce how many how many ships I can have.
Yeah,
And I think we've really taken mod on that journey and won the argument that actually investment in digital is really essential. And to see speeches like Commander Stratcom talking about coders being as important as special force operators or submariners, and the previous chief of the defense staff describing software as increasingly more important than hardware, alongside the investment they've made in it over the integrated review. Yeah, that's a real big, and I think that's testament to everybody who's been involved in this journey, of those 22 teams and others around it, on taking us getting that narrative moved along.
No, that's awesome. I think one of the things I was really interested in asking you, and again, you partly answered it there, was I can only imagine how difficult it is for a rear admiral, 2-3 star, frontline commander to get around the idea of spending their budget on digital coding, as you mentioned then, and not buying the tank, the extra piece of kit. So are there any lessons you learned now on helping the guys understand the value of it?
So I think we in defense have had a real bad track record of delivery for digital and IT solutions.
Sure.
So if you're going to invest, even if it's the right thing to do, it's got to be deliverable. And I think that was one of the key things which we had to achieve early on, was getting the confidence and the credibility that delivery was possible.
Yeah.
And we that sort of agile delivery of get things out into the hands of the users, I think, is a really credible way of doing that. I would say there's a really horrible valley of death in the mod, around how do you get into the hands of the user once compared to its enterprise or its standard fit on the fleet or whatever it has to be, which is hard and different. So I think credibility is really one of them.
Sure.
I think the other one in terms of balance of investment is this is a piece of work which is still ongoing, is what is the right benefits matrix and how do you have a framework? It's really, if I'm honest, quite dry stuff, but actually playing the game of balance of investment and really articulating around how investment in robotic process automation is going to free up this number of staff, which is going to have this impact on how you can put more people on the front line or whatever it happens to be. That's really key as well, and you've got to really engage that team and not just kind of say, well, isn't it obvious? Obviously you want to automate. Well, maybe, but you still got to quantify how do we go on that journey. I think the other one as well is sort of alongside the credibility of delivery, I think it is that hands-on touching. We did a huge amount of energy in the Navy on getting seniors in through the door to see, feel, and touch the thing. And that sort of, I think credibility is, seeing you said you're going to do something and then delivering it on time, on budget, etc., and getting the feedback from the local commanding officer or whatever it has to be that it's been successful. But there's a piece around getting in the headspace of the kind of change and being able to touch it and feel it. So every time I ever did a senior brief or seniors came to our offices, I always did a live demo, because that really, I always go to briefs and see PowerPoints and it's vaporware. And then so the fact that you're prepared to do a live demo, and they did go wrong a couple of times, I think it's kind of thing. So, but that sort of hands-on touch was really important for us to kind of build the understanding of what we were doing.
Yeah, no, and I remember a few years back, all the talk down what you guys were doing there was just tons and tons of workshops. It seemed to be, getting everyone in a room together to do that. And I think, to go back to what you said earlier on the culture piece, I'm certainly a big believer that oftentimes that the culture and the people are almost more important than the technology. But what were some of the things that you implemented to get the right culture, and some of the lessons you learned there, which you've taken on?
So we created a real one team ethos.
Sure.
And that was really important across military, civil servant, DSDL, and our various different sort of contractor or supplier base.
Sure.
And that kind of created a culture whereby people could speak truth to power, people could take suitable risk, and it also meant when things were tricky, people leaned in because it was a collective endeavor, even if it wasn't particularly your project involved in the thing. Actually, it was a one team culture. That's and I think we were really successful about some stuff there, but there was a lot of lessons learned around what are the successful mechanisms to get that one team culture. I think one of the things which we did, which I mirrored off actually some of other government departments who did this, was we needed the physical location did matter, and so we took a real deliberate step to be in the naval base, in the thick of it amongst our users, but slightly, giving people their own space so that actually we could use the space in the way we wanted to. No one would come and take our post-it notes off the wall, and we could create our own culture without necessarily having to be constrained by the environment already there. If you try to set up a digital team in the middle of a operational headquarters, you're going to be challenged because you're butting into the completely understandable cultural norms of that organization. So we did a bunch of things around that in terms of one team. We started being a lot more transparent, so that I think it's probably my best example of do and beg for forgiveness was setting up the Defence Digital blog, where it was one of these sort of things where nobody was prepared to say, yeah, it's okay. So we just did it and started blogging about the work which we did. That was really cool, and I think that was just one of we had a GitHub account for the first time, so whereby we could show some of the code we were doing. We ran hackathons where people, different bits of industry, could come and trial some of the technology which we were using. And as you said, that's exactly what the hackathon proved. It wasn't really about the tech. We could run other ways to ensure the technology was understood and moving forwards. It was about demonstrating the cultural change and sort of living and breathing that. So a lot of techniques like that, which we really tried to live and breathe. And actually, we're talking about collaboration recently here, and I said, you can't underestimate the investment to make that culture possible. You have to give dedicated time of people to really organizing those sorts of events, or asking people to write blogs. It all takes time. It's not something you can do just on top of the 100% which people are working at today already. So that's kind of quite easy to forget that just put the right people in the right room and the culture will blossom. Actually, it's something you really need to target and be proactive on how you're going to make it possible.
Yeah, no, nice. And I guess from the industry side then, because I think that was the thing that I noticed most. Certainly when you were heading up the Navy Digital Services, I think it was Digital you were working with product workshops, and it seems certainly very collaborative between yourselves and industry, and I think sometimes it hasn't been like that. So I guess a couple of questions really. When you are looking for industry partners, I assume collaboration is a big thing. How do you judge that yourselves? And I guess for any sort of industry partners listening, is there some tips you can give them to help that collaboration with Mod?
So I think increasingly what we're looking for is partnership. Now, people might come in and do a quick little piece of work or put bums in seats. That's not really partnership. So and that is a perfectly legitimate bit of how we need for industry engagement in the industry. But that's sort of my caveat, because I think what people are interested to hear about is the partnership bit, which is perhaps the bit which is less common. So we're setting up a partnership where you're in an equal measure. It's not so much, there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to do around contracts in terms of blah, 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 but it is around behaviors and ways of working, and how you live and breathe that. And it's moving away from a transactional approach towards a true partnership where you've got a shared sense of understanding of what you're trying for. I think in that partnership, like we the mod have to be really recognize that you industry, you want to make money. That is what you are there to do. Bottom
Yeah.
line. Don't get me wrong. There's, I've seen industry do all kinds of things inside defence for the national endeavour, and really be amazing. But at the end of the day, industry is there to make money. So acknowledge that and be comfortable with that in that partnership. And don't be afraid. It's not a crude or dirty thing to talk about. Let's have that conversation so that actually we understand your incentives and what you're trying to do, and therefore that can kind of work. In setting that partnership up, it's the ability to be able to have a really good conversation as well, rather than the delivery teams scurried away somewhere, and then once a quarter there's a big PowerPoint with many a Gantt chart and you're reviewing a RAG risk. Actually, how are we having a very regular dynamic dialogue and discourse, as you'd expect from partners who are discussing things have gone well for us, things have gone bad for us, and you've got to be able to have that sort of conversation as we move forwards. One of the things which we're really interested in doing more of, and there's a great blog post on, I think, DEFRA's blog around something called fund teams, not projects. And that's one of the real pain points we have in defence, is that 31st of March comes along and there's real pain as our financial system impacts projects because they're just so time bound, and all that partnership's lost when you've got that sort of time-bound nature to it. And it's not that, I shouldn't say, it's not the problem with being time-bound, because I think probably all partnerships are time-bound, but it's the cliff edge element to it, which doesn't kind of work. So we're putting quite a lot of energy into how do we fund teams, not projects, and I think that's really underpinned by some of the developments happening elsewhere in defence digital. So the service executive model for me is fundamental to our success in the future. So I don't know how much your listeners or about it, but moving away from project teams building a thing, and this is not what happens, but being unfair, chucking it over the wall and then sort of moving on to the next project, and ops have to pick it up and if anything goes wrong, to a service executive model where the service executive owns the end-to-end delivery and the outcome for the end user in its entirety. And I think that's going to have a really powerful impact in terms of feeling empowered to take change and do things to ensure your users are really well partnered. That really supports the sort of teams, not projects mentality. So how do we contract in the right way to support that? Something which we're starting to unpick and kind of tease out. I think one thing which we're also looking at really hard is how do we have a more enterprise approach? So I mean, already in the sort of 8 months I've been here, I think we've worked with commercial on probably about half a dozen enterprise license agreements. And there's a couple of things with that. Yeah, we want better value for money because we're buying 2,000 licenses 10 times rather than 20,000 license. But also, and again, this comes back to partnership. We want to understand what everybody's doing in defence because we'd really love to help them get on and make their lives easier and better. And so actually having a partnership whereby we say, wow, how many licenses have we got and how can we optimize that? And that means, actually it's a lot easier for one of those 22 teams to quickly get on and do something because there's an enterprise license set up and going. They don't have to go and reinvent the wheel themselves. So that's a really big piece of work as well in terms of really trying to make that kind of efficiency, whether that be in value for money or access. And I think that's a real win-win because it's hugely exhausting for industry perpetually having to go around all the bazaars rather than actually be able to have a common license, which we're doing. One bit which I didn't touch on perhaps in your previous question, which we're working really hard on, is and it aligns that is product pages. So moving forwards towards really publishing on the internet what services we provide and what some of those, for example, enterprise licenses are, because at the moment it's scurried away in all kinds of different intranets and extranets and PDF forms and all this kind of stuff. Actually, how can we make it a lot easier for people to understand what's available and what's not?
Yeah, no, I think it's, as I said, I think it's that there's definitely been a noticeable shift with this, the partnership type approach. And I guess one of the questions I was interested in is, without a doubt, I think, the Navy Digital Services and all of the changes that have certainly made Mod better at delivering software, and we're definitely more agile than we've ever been. So within that, what do you see as the future with partnerships? Do you feel that Mod are going to be taking on more projects themselves and become less reliant? I don't know. What do you think the future looks like?
So I'm definitely trying to build a greater Crown talent base. Just the bit of DD in the middle. I've got the kicking off the Foundry by the end of this year. We've got 117 roles, and that's growing to something like 250 by the end of the spending review period. So talent's going to be really at the heart of this, but our model is 100% whole force, and that growth in Crown talent, and we're doing a whole bunch of stuff around whether it's military, whether we can use the kind of permissions other government departments have so that we can pay civil servants better, and all that kind of stuff we're working on. But that's still part of our whole force mix, and that's to make the whole force mix needs to be balanced, and we're really trying to enable that balance by having the right kind of Crown talent inside there. So industry have got a huge part to play, and that partnerships is all about that huge part industry have to play. So we're absolutely not trying to do it ourselves. I think there's a really great debate around where does the design authorities fit for certain kind of elements, and I've used that term in a very fluffy way here because people have very specific meanings in different places on for what they mean by that. But in essence, what role do we want? How much do we want to define or own the design of how the bits fit together? And I think some places we've got to be really comfortable that if we want to be able to if we really want to get the best out of industry, and we really want to have some of the complexity, we're going to need to have a requirement where actually how tightly bound a capability is. We need to be able to allow industry to have that, drive that design and define how that is. But equally, how the interface is out of how tightly coupled that is something which we're increasingly interested in, because we will want a sensor on a ship. We want that data to be available to a medic in a hospital back in the UK, and that sort of level is going to require us to have a much better sort of thinking of what the digital backbone is, and kind of think from that perspective of multi-domain integration. So I think in terms of who does work, I'm really passionate about, you've got to give industry the problem, not just body shopping teams. That's where some of the real innovation and excitement will come from. But part of that partnership, industry have got to recognize they're in a system of systems, and so actually we're increasingly being really clear on how we want systems to dock in. Let me take an example in my space around DevSecOps. So you can now go onto the internet, you can see our approach to how we're delivering DevSecOps, what our CI/CD pipeline is, what the technology stack is, and we will ask you to provide your product onto that technology stack. That's really industry standard tech, so it's not constraining industry in any kind of way, and the solution you provide on top of that, kind of all kinds of IPR wrapped inside it. It can be tightly bound, so we don't necessarily industry, but how it runs inside our ecosystem, we're kind of laying down the rules of the road. And I think what we'll really start to see over the next year or two is an increase around the data element of that. So how industry provides capability, not just to solve the specific business problem, but actually that data needs to be really available to the whole ecosystem. And we're increasingly publishing information on how we want industry to work and behave to enable that sort of integration.
Yeah, no, great. And I guess as we're getting towards the end of this, I think you've mentioned a few times how important talent is, for anyone who is watching, thinking, about, I guess, a career as civil servant in defence digital, or anywhere within it. What are some of the growth areas you're looking to hire in? What are some of the exciting things that people maybe aren't aware of, when they're looking to join?
There are so many opportunities coming up.
Yeah.
We are hiring broadly across the whole of the digital data and technology profession, and you'll see a lot of the jobs very sort of articulated in terms of that sort of cabinet office professional framework, DDAT. Whether it's a technical architect or a front-end developer using that sort of language, and I think early doors, some of that hire is really with Defence Digital. So we've got a whole bunch of capabilities under the bonnet, whether that be automation and low code, data, DevSecOps, learning platforms, synthetic environments, so all kinds of stuff. But then we've also got a lot of user facing, so building applications on top of that. We've got all kinds of battle space applications, business space applications, and I think that's some of the early bit of recruitment we'll do. I then think increasingly it will be part of the Federation. So actually a lot of that recruitment will support directly the Army or the Navy or whoever it might be. And I suppose one of the really exciting things, which I've, the sort of somehow a silver lining out of COVID was it's really helped us accelerate the view that you don't need to be co-located in the office the whole time.
Yeah.
And so we haven't managed to sort of formally get the policy out, but we're really working on how do we have a much better relationship with talent in terms of where they live, with hubs around the UK, and actually being quite clear around if you're part of a delivery team, our expectation will be something like, you have to come to the fortnightly sprints, you have to, this, that, and the other. But that opens up a whole world of opportunity in terms of being able to shape your personal life, or shape your work life, I should say, to fit your personal circumstances. That might be location, that might be childcare, that might be all kinds of things. So that's really, really exciting for me, because I think, that gives us opportunity to work with a whole bunch of amazing people who perhaps previously wouldn't have felt up for working in mod. We're looking at graduates as well. Got a number, apprenticeships. A number of apprenticeships are joining us over the next couple of months. We've got a number of different schemes we're attached to. So it's a real whole mixed bag. I do think in the future, I am being asked, is all of that enough? So I think there's some questions ahead for us around, even with all those mechanisms I've talked about, are we going to enable the kind of growth we want? Don't know. That's probably for a future episode as we go down this journey. But we have got an unbelievable amount of stuff to do. It's really exciting tech. It's a mission which is on your TV screens every day at the moment. So I get very excited whenever I do my introductions with new staff, because they've really joined at a really exciting time. And that's the same with our industry partners. I have to say, getting a new partner on board, get very excited, because what we're doing here is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it exudes from you when you talk about it, and I think that passion will only buy people in. I guess finish on a relatively tough question to answer, but 8 months in a Digital Foundry now, what do you see as the future? 5-10 years down the line, where do you think it'll be? What would you like it to be? Where would you like to take it?
So for me, my target's 3 years. So in the next 3 years, how credible has the Foundry, and how much have we managed to deliver on the ambition and the expectation set up? So I would really hope to see all our major 22 teams are thoroughly exploiting this federated ecosystem to the max. They are cracking on, delivering business problems, user problems at pace, not having to worry about the underpinning technology which is provided to them as a professional self-service capability, which delivers for their needs. I'd expect to see a 10, not 10 times size, but a huge increase in terms of that talent element inside it, where people really recognize that coming to work for mod in technology, you're not going to be sort of stuck in the back office working on a old COBOL system, but actually delivering containerized applications or a data mesh, pioneering capability across a broad spectrum of different use cases. So that 3 year target for me is really key, and that hooks into the spending review cycles. So we got a big settlement from the Treasury, and in my mind, that was the Treasury saying to us, yeah, your argument's fair. Here's your moment to prove yourself. And I'm really, really determined our part of that in Defence Digital. And if you look at something like the command paper, the word digital is used more than any other word inside it. Our part in Defence Digital, we've got to really stand up and be sort of take account for the fact that we've got to deliver on that kind of that mandate. Over the rest of that period, I mean, you know, I think anybody could kind of guess what that sort of sounds like in terms of digital is not going away, the use of our data, AI, it's all going to increase in time. I think personally for me, it's these next 3 years which I'm really focused on before doing too much future gazing.
Yeah, no, nice. And well, it's the way software and digital works, right? The world changes so quickly that you probably can't plan. 3 years is a long time in the modern world. It's not like it used to be, but it sounds as exciting as what it was in 2015, if not more so. So, I'm sure people listening, whether they're industry partners or graduates, will be excited to get on the journey. So it's awesome.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Danny.
Yeah, thanks. It was great to speak to you. Some really interesting insights. And I said, if nothing else, it's nice to speak to someone who's just so passionate about, where this is going to go. And I think it feels like the Foundry's in safe hands.
Well, the proof will be in the pudding. That's what I tell everybody. I will look forward to another one of these interviews in a year's time when I can point to yet more delivery, because that's what really matters, is what we've given to the people on the front line and our users.
Yeah, no, amazing. But listen, that was amazing. Brilliant. Thank you for joining, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
Cheers then. Thank you.
Bye bye.